And we are live, ladies and gentlemen. We are live. Welcome to Benchley Night. Welcome to Benchley Night on a humid but not unbearably hot Vermont evening. I am home. The great Betty Sue is nearly home. Today she drove from Wichita, Kansas to Austin, Texas, which is like 500 miles. But now she's going to be home, and then soon she's going to be coming to Vermont, which is going to be great to see the wonderful Betty Sue. Very much looking forward to that. So now we, ladies and gentlemen, we are busy in our new experiment of switching Benchley Nights and Reasonably Fine Art Talks over to YouTube, because me and Mark Zuckerbuck do not seem to get along very well these days. So let me know how it feels to you. I think you can post comments. I should be able to see comments. Neo-Expressionism Fine Art Drawings by Gulas Mutlu is watching. Hi, Neo-Expressionism. Great to see you. Great. We've got 9 people watching. That's great. All right. And we've got a few people to thank, because what we are now doing. Oh, Catherine Fisher's here. Jim Frisk is here. Excellent, excellent. HS is here. Just as easy as faceplant. Excellent, excellent. That's Helen. That must be Helen. Anyway, what we are now doing is I'm going to make my Substack, which is my old email list. My Substack now has the option to you can do a subscription and pay money. And that is how I'm going to fund the liberal do-gooder liberal snowplowing do-gooder fund, rather than trying to get Faceplant to set up fundraisers, and they don't like doing that. I'm not going to show up in their algorithms anymore now that I'm over on YouTube. Hi, Tracy. It is Helen. I thought so. Anyway, so we've got, ladies and gentlemen, we have 3 people who have subscribed. We have 3 people who have subscribed. And the unidentified unglet McCann is eager to give them a shout out. Now, this is the unidentified unglet, the previous unidentified unglet that Betty Sue likes better. But it has very little lung capacity, I would say. So get ready. Our first subscriber, our very first subscriber is the excellent Kate Fry. Next up, the indomitable Catherine Fisher. After that, out there in Omaha, Nebraska, the peripatetic Mr. John T. Wilhelm. In Saxons River, Vermont, Ms. Martha Rowley. She does porch drops, ladies and gentlemen. She does porch drops with little checks. Where is it? It's over, right over there. Right over here, ladies and gentlemen, right over here. Thank you so much, Ms. Martha Rowley. It is appreciated. Helen says she also donated. Can she have a shout out too? Of course, Helen. Yes, because if you donate to the charity each week, you just have to let me know. And then the unglet is eager to give you a shout out. To Miss Helen Sistek, thank you so much. Up there in St. Albans, Vermont. Just about ready to take a trip, ladies and gentlemen. He's about ready to go up to Montreal, Canada, and get on Via Rail's ocean and travel to Halifax, Nova Scotia. And then he will turn around, ladies and gentlemen, and come right straight back again. My kind of man, Mr. Jim Frisk. And of course, no, not my very, very tall cousin. I've not heard from him this week. But of course, as ever, Nani Moose. Nani Moose always gives. Thank you, Nani Moose. All right, ladies and gentlemen. Now, do we prefer that little strangled sounding ungulate, or do we prefer the more full-throated ungulate? But I think the more full-throated ungulate is also starting to get a disease and is less less voluble than it used to be. Anyway, it's great to have you here. I don't know how many of you know this story. It's not one of the most famous stories, but it's a very good one. We're going to have part one of it tonight. And this is a story about, well, spoiler alert. Maybe I won't give the spoiler alert next week. I already gave the spoiler alert in the promo for this, but next week you'll find out. Anyway, nothing new under the sun, hardly. And there's Homer, there's the sheriff, and they're looking mighty suspicious, and they've got a little dog friend with them. And they're looking suspiciously over at the vehicle driven by the stranger. Nothing new under the sun, hardly. Part one. After the county fair, you all remember the county fair, right? With Miss Ida B. Terwilliger and her clever way of asserting her independence. Well, after the county fair, life in Centerbird eases back into normal. Homer and the rest of the children concentrate on arithmetic and basketball, and the grown-ups tend to business and running the town in a peaceful, democratic way. Election time still being a month away, the Democrats and the Republicans are still speaking to one another. The Ladies' Aid hasn't anything to crusade about at the moment, and Uncle Ulysses hasn't bought any newfangled equipment for his lunchroom recently. There's nothing for people to gossip about or speculate on or argue about. There's always the weather, the latest books and movies, and ladies' hats. But of course, that doesn't provide nearly enough to talk and think about for a whole month until election time. Uncle Ulysses, the sheriff, and the men around the barber shop usually run out of things to talk about toward the middle of the month. Sometimes during the mornings, the conversation is lively. Like today, the sheriff came in beaming and said, "Well, I put on woolen underwear this morning." "So," said Uncle Ulysses, "guess I'll have to ask Aggie to get mine out of mothballs this week." "Huh," said the barber. I wouldn't wear woolen underwear for anything on earth. It itches." Well, that was something to argue about for almost an hour. Then the subject changed to woolen socks, then to shoes, to overshoes, to mud in roads, mud in barnyards and barns, and then to chicken coops. Well, then there was a long pause. Only 10:30 by the town hall clock, and conversation had already dwindled to nothing at all. Nothing to do but look out of the barber shop window. "Well, there goes Doc Pelly," said the barber. "I wonder who's sick." "Judge's wife is having a fainting spell, maybe," suggested the sheriff. "Colby's wife is expecting a baby," said Uncle Ulysses. "I'll ask Aggie this noon, and she'll know all about it." "There's Dulcie Dooner," said the sheriff. "He hasn't worked for 3 years," added He hasn't worked for 3 years, added the barber disapprovingly. A few children came into view. "School's out for lunch," pronounced the sheriff. The door opened and Homer came in, saying, "Hello, everybody. Uncle Ulysses, Aunt Aggie sent me over to tell you to stir yourself over to the lunchroom and help serve blue plate specials." Uncle Ulysses sighed and prepared to leave. The sheriff cupped a hand behind his ear and said, "What's that?" Uncle Ulysses stopped, and everybody listened. And here's the great picture. Here's the great picture, ladies and gentlemen. All the people in the small town barber shop looking at this mysterious object passing outside. There's the sheriff, there's the barber, there's Uncle Ulysses, there's Homer, and they're all looking at what is driving by. Oh my goodness. The noise, it was sort of a rattle, grew louder. And then suddenly an old car swung into the town square. The sheriff, the barber, Uncle Ulysses, and Homer watched it with gaping mouths as it rattled around the town square once, twice, and on the third time slowed down and shivered to a stop right in front of Uncle Ulysses' lunchroom. It wasn't cut because this car was old enough to be an antique, or because some strange business was built onto it, or that the strange business was covered with a large canvas. No, that wasn't what made Homer and the sheriff and Uncle Ulysses and the barber stare so long. It was the car's driver. Gosh, what a beard, said Homer. And what a head of hair, said the barber. That's a $2 cutting job if I ever saw one. Well, I got to remember to do the barber in New England accent for some reason. And what a head of hair, said the barber. That's a $2 cutting job if ever I saw one. Could you see his face? Asked the sheriff. Nope, answered Uncle Ulysses, still staring across the square. They watched the stranger untangle his beard from the steering wheel and go into the lunchroom. Uncle Ulysses dashed for the door, saying, Well, I'll see you later. Wait for me, said the sheriff. I'm sort of hungry. Homer followed, and the barber shouted, Don't forget to come back and tell me the news. Okay, and if I bring you a new customer, I get a commission. The stranger was sitting at the far end of the lunch counter, looking very shy and very embarrassed. Homer's Aunt Aggie had already served him a blue plate special and was eyeing him with suspicion. To be polite, Homer and Uncle Ulysses pretended to be busy behind the counter, and the sheriff pretended to study that menu, though he knew every single word of it by heart. They just glanced in the stranger's direction every now and then. Finally, Uncle Ulysses' curiosity got the best of him, and he sauntered down to the stranger. And he asked, Enjoying your lunch? Everything all right? The stranger appeared to be very embarrassed. You could easily tell he was blushing underneath his beard and all that hair. Yes, sir, it's a very good lunch, he replied with a nod. When he nodded, a stray wisp of beard accidentally got into the gravy. That made him even more embarrassed than ever. Uncle Ulysses waited for the stranger to start a conversation, but he didn't. So Uncle Ulysses said, Nice day today. The stranger said, Yes, nice day, and dropped a fork. Now the stranger really was embarrassed. He looked as though he would like to sink right through the floor. Uncle Ulysses quickly handed the man another fork and eased himself away so as not to embarrass him into breaking a plate or falling off a stool. Oh, and here's the picture. Here's the picture, ladies and gentlemen. Here's the stranger eating his lunch with Homer. Homer's cleaning a plate, but kind of looking at the stranger. And down at the end of the counter, the sheriff and Uncle Ulysses are certainly looking at the stranger. And what's that on the floor, ladies and gentlemen? It's a menu, but look at the bottom of the menu. Is that a little mouse's head I see? Oh, we're going to find out, aren't we? Oh, aren't these great stories, ladies and gentlemen? Aren't these great? After he finished lunch, the stranger reached into the pocket of his ragged, patched coat and drew out a leather money bag. He paid for his lunch, nodded goodbye, and crept out of the door and down the street, with everyone staring after him. Aunt Aggie broke the silence by bouncing on the marble counter the coin she had just received. "It's good money," she pronounced, "but it looks as though it has been buried for years." "Shyest man I ever laid eyes on," said Uncle Ulysses. "Yeah," said the sheriff. "He's shy as a mouse." "Gosh, what a beard," said Homer. "Huh," said Aunt Aggie. "Homer, it's time you started back to school." By mid-afternoon, every man, woman, and child in Centerburg had something to gossip about, speculate on, and argue about. Who was this stranger? Where did he come from? Where was he going? How long was his beard and his hair? What was his name? Did he have a business? What could be on the back of his car that was so carefully covered with that large canvas? Nobody knew. Nobody knew anything about the stranger except that he had parked his car in the town parking space and was spending considerable time walking about town. People reported that he paused in his walking and he whistled. He whistled a few bars of some strange tune, a tune nobody had ever heard of. The stranger was shy when grown-ups were near, and he would cross the street or go around the block to avoid speaking to someone. However, he did not avoid children. He smiled at them and seemed delighted to have them follow him. People from all over town telephoned the sheriff at the barber shop, asking about the stranger and making reports as to what was going on. The sheriff was becoming a bit uneasy about this whole thing. He could not get near enough to the stranger to ask him his intentions, and if he did ask, the stranger would be too shy to give him an answer. As Homer passed by the barber shop on his way home from school, the sheriff called him in. "Homer," he said, "I'm going to need your help. This stranger with the beard has got me worried. You see, Homer, I can't find out who he is or what he's doing here in town. He's probably a nice enough fella, just an individualist. But then again, he might be a fugitive in disguise or something." Homer nodded, and the sheriff continued, "Now, what I want you to do is gain his confidence. He doesn't seem to be afraid of children, and you might be able to find out what this is all about. I'll treat you to a double raspberry sundae." "That's a deal, Sheriff," said Homer. "I'll start right now." At 6 o'clock, Homer reported to the sheriff. "The stranger seems like a nice person, Sheriff." "I walked down Market Street with him," Homer began. "He would not tell me who he is or what he's doing, but he did say he'd been away from people for a great many years. He asked me to recommend a place for him to stay, and I said the Strand Hotel, so that's where he went just now when I left him. I'll have to run home to dinner now, Sheriff, but I'll find out some more tomorrow. Don't you forget about that raspberry sundae," said Homer. "I won't," replied the sheriff. "And Homer, don't forget to keep me posted about this fellow." After Homer had gone, the sheriff turned to the barber and said, "Well, God darn it, we don't know one blessed thing about this fella, except he's shy and he's been away from people for quite a spell. For all we know, he might be a fugitive or a lunatic or maybe one of them amnesia cases." If he didn't have so much hair, I could tell in a second what kind of fella he is. No, I'm reading it wrong, sorry. If he didn't have so much hair, I could tell in a second what kind of fella he is, complained the sheriff. Yep, just one look at a person's ears, and I can tell. Well now, said the barber, I judge people by their hair, and I've been thinking, this fellow, he looks like somebody I've heard about or read about somewhere, like somebody out of a book. You understand, Sheriff? Well, yes, in a way, but I can tell you definite with a good look at his ears, said the sheriff. Here comes Ulysses. Let's ask him what he thinks. Uncle Ulysses considered a moment and said, well, I judge a person by his waistline and his appetite. Now, I'm not saying I'm right, Sheriff, because I couldn't tell about his waistline under that old coat. But judging from his appetite, I'd say he's the sort of person that, that I've read about somewhere. I just can't put my finger on it. Seems as though it must have been in some book. Said the sheriff. Just then, Tony, the shoe repair man, came in for a haircut. After he was settled in the barber chair, the sheriff asked him what he thought about the mysterious stranger. Well, Sheriff, I judge everybody by their feet and their shoes. Nobody's worn a pair of gaiters like his for 25 years. It seems as though those shoes must have just got up and walked right out of the pages of some old dusty book. There, said the sheriff. Now we're getting someplace. He rushed to the phone. He called Mr. Hirsch of the Hirsch clothing store. And he said, Say, Sam, what do you think about this stranger? Yeah, the one bit the weird. I mean, with the beard. Uh-huh. Storybook clothes, huh? Thanks a lot, Sam. Good night. Then he called the garage and he said, Hey, Luke, this is the sheriff talking. What do you make of this stranger in town? Yeah? Literature, huh? Darn if I can see how you can judge a man by the car he drives, but I'll take your word for it. Good night, Luke. Thanks a lot. The sheriff looked very pleased with himself. He paced up and down and he muttered, Getting somewhere at last. Then he surprised everybody by announcing that he was going over to the library. In a few minutes, he was back, his mustache twitching with excitement. I've solved it, he shouted. The librarian knew right off what book to look in. It's Rip Van Winkle. It's Rip Van Winkle this fella's like. He must have driven up into the hills some 30 years ago and fell asleep or got amnesia or something. Yep, that's it, agreed the barber along with Uncle Ulysses and the shoemaker. Then Uncle Ulysses asked, But how about that, whatever it is, underneath the canvas on the back of the car? Now you look here, Ulysses, shouted the sheriff. You're just trying to complicate my deductions. Come on, let's play checkers. And we're going to stop it there tonight, ladies and gentlemen. We've got the scene set. We've got the stranger. We've got the stranger with his device. We've got the suspicious townspeople. We've got the archetype that it is supposedly following, Rip Van Winkle. But, join us next week for the conclusion, for part 2 of Nothing New Under the Sun, hardly. Thanks a lot. Great to have you here. Bye-bye.